Fish.
All right, welcome in, everybody. It is Sports Daily. Glad to have you with us today. Jacob Albracht here alongside Malcolm Carter for Hour 1. Tommy Castor will be in for Hour number 2 as we make our way into another game week for the Chiefs. We're to Conference Championship weekend, and we're glad to be here with you. By the way, if you can't get enough Chiefs coverage, you can check out that New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelce, the podcast. It's free on the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcast. That will be an interesting one this week, as you've got Jason Kelce, maybe retired, maybe he's not. You can talk about his adventures in Buffalo. So that should be a pretty good one to watch those sound clips. We'll keep our eye on it as well. But we have a KU post-game reaction from last night, a late one against Cincinnati. KU hangs on for a 5-point win. We'll get into that a little bit as well as we make our way through. We'll have the executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel, joining us in the second hour of the program. And we may connect here with Shreyas Laddha to talk about that KU game as well. Our KU Insider will do that a little bit later in this hour too. Malcolm, your Lions survive again, riding high today. How are you, man?
I wouldn't call it survival. That was a pretty good game we put together. I feel like Buccaneers went in there and did some of the things I thought they would be able to do, especially against our secondary. But overall, I'm pleased. I'm definitely pleased with what we put on tape.
Is it real? And can they beat the 49ers? Look, the Niners have been flawed when they're not completely healthy, and we don't know about Debo right now. I feel like the Lions have a shot here. Now, Goff's got to go on the road. He's got to play outdoors, got to do all that stuff. Are you riding on house money right now, or like what would be your level of devastation if they don't get it done in the NFC Championship game?
I expect us to win. I don't think we're going into that game feeling like this team is just that much better than us. I think we complement them very well. So I think that we'll be able to, get some things going just like they'll be able to get some things going. But really, I'm looking at it like two pretty even teams going at it.
It's really interesting. I this whole championship weekend, when you look at it, I don't know how many people would have put the Chiefs and the Lions this far in. I think that, the Lions have fought doubters all year. I don't know if I've qualified as a doubter. I just didn't think they were quite there yet. Clearly they are. Now, their path to get there has been pretty advantageous in who they've played so far. That's kind of handy. The Chiefs had plenty of doubters, right? Everybody thought they were dead and all these things, and here they are again. It's interesting as we look at it. The Lions are 7-point underdogs on the road. The Chiefs 3.5. But, man, I really think there's absolutely a possibility of a Chiefs-Lions Super Bowl here. And I have been slow on the Ravens all year. They looked really good in the second half against Houston. And the 49ers, I'm telling you right now, Malcolm, if Deebo Samuel doesn't play, I might take the Lions. I would for sure take the points. I might take the Lions because they have just been a different team when they're not completely healthy. And my guess is that Deebo will play. But I do think we're looking at a conference championship weekend where something crazy is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're just walking into Niners-Ravens here. I feel like something's going to shake that up a little bit. Those have been the two best teams all year. I get it. But the way this year's gone, that doesn't feel like that's the way this is going to go this weekend, where the home teams just win and we get Niners-Ravens again.
No, I agree 100%. Of course, as a Lions fan, I'm feeling like we'll be the ones to take care of business there.
Yeah.
But, honestly, both of these games are pick'em games to me. I think that ultimately it's going to come down to the turnover battle. Whoever team is able to force turnovers on the other team, I think that's really what's going to settle both of these games. And I think all 4 teams would say that that's been something that's plagued them throughout the season.
When you look at the Chiefs and how big, I think it's clear now, and we know that, their star players, Mahomes, Kelce, Chris Jones especially, and it trickles down as you listen to locker room sound. They love chip on the shoulder. They love anything they can hang up on the bulletin board. they've used that tremendously, and I think it all sort of came out against in the post game against Buffalo. And I wonder now if any of that, subsides a little bit or fades. I don't think there's anybody anymore that don't think the Chiefs have a chance to win this game or whatever. They've got to go to Baltimore. I just wonder if that much adrenaline, and the Lions sort of face this too. Like when there's been so much adrenaline to get you to this point, I wonder how much of that fades and how you battle through that. We know the Chiefs can do it. They've done it lots of times. But man, the Lions, I just like the one thing about that game is when you've had the environment they've had for 2 weeks playing at Ford Field and doing all that, and now you go on the that does have to be just a little bit deflating, I would think, to come off of that high to now have to go to San Francisco. Now they've got to use what like the Chiefs have done. You've got to use that. You've got to embrace the underdog. You've got to understand that nobody's giving you a chance to now go do it. I don't know. I think it's an interesting dynamic for that team, and we just haven't seen it. We don't know, right? How they're going to respond to that kind of thing.
Well, I think the Cowboys game is a perfect example of we talk about grit with the Lions and that kind of Detroit versus everybody mentality. I think we've had that mantra all season. I don't think going into the 49ers is going to be any different. That we're feeling like, hey, no one wanted us to be here. Everyone's been talking about the franchise, how we haven't been able to get it done. We've been getting it done all year. So I don't really see too much wind being taken out of our sails. I think if the 49ers win, I think they beat us because they're the better team. But I think our adrenaline, especially golf being back in Cali, weather looks fine, by the way. But I think we'll be able to compete, and I think that we feel like, hey, why can't we win?
Well, I sure. I mean that, and the Niners will have a lot to do with that. I'm just going to pull up here,
Hmm.
Jared Goff by game, and we'll look at any weather games he's played this year. He went to Chicago in December and was not good. He went to Baltimore in October and was not good. Not terrible, but not great. He went to Green Bay in September and was pretty good. And he went to Kansas City, of course, to open the season, and he was good. So I don't know how much of that narrative I mean, most recently in Chicago when the weather was bad, right? And they played a lot of their games on the road indoor. Their last two that they played, in fact, Dallas and Minnesota, were both indoor games. 3 out of their last 4 were indoor games. 4 out of their last 5 were at least indoor no, they were indoor games. So 4 out of their last 5 road games have been indoors. They have only played outside one time since October 22nd. And in that one time against Chicago, Goff had his worst game of the year. So, like, I do think that stuff matters. Now, if the weather's good, that helps, certainly. But it's sort of a narrative that's floated with Goff for a long time. And in the true outdoor games he's played this year, other than that Chiefs opener, he has not been as good as he's been indoor. He was really good in Tampa, if you want to look at that. That was his best, true road game. But again, you're in Florida, right? I don't know how much this matters in this game. I think probably Dan Campbell would like it to matter less, and maybe we see a little more running from the Lions than we're accustomed to. But it's this elephant. I love that Jared Goff, who's been to a Super Bowl and was a former number 1 pick, feels like there's all these boxes he needs to check, but this is a box he needs to check.
Right. Now, I think you could point to Green Bay's game, that last game of the season last year, where we beat them to knock them from going to the playoffs. It's really the temperature more so than it being outside. I think that when you're talking about close to freezing temperatures, I think that does have an effect on Jared. I would have to say objectively for sure. But I think outside isn't more so the element, more so than the wind and the actual temperature that he's throwing in. Because sometimes he'll put on a glove. I think for some quarterbacks that does affect the zip that they have on it. And he's not the strongest arm in the NFL. So when you're talking about fighting against the wind, throwing with a glove on, I think that does have an effect on how he plays. But we're we're going to Cali. I think we're not worried about below freezing temperatures or anything like that. So I think Jared will be fine. They'll drum up some type of narrative regardless, but I think he performs fine, especially in games that matter the most. You could point to a few games here or there, but I mean, if you looked at the last 3-4 weeks, he's done everything that he's needed to
Yeah, I agree. But it's all been endorsed, so we'll see. I hope they
do.
win. I do. I really hope they win. Chiefs on the other side, and we'll get into a lot. We'll dig deep on the Chiefs here in just a little bit with Dan Israel in the top of the next hour. But I just like I'm not picking against the Chiefs right now. And Lamar Jackson finally had his good playoff game. But it's still what, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6. I still can't when you've got one of the best playoff quarterbacks we've ever seen, and it's early in his career, but there's already that large a sample size. Taking on Lamar Jackson, as good a season as he's had, and he was great in the second half against Houston. He wasn't great in the first half, and he hasn't been great over his career in the postseason. I just don't know how you can comfortably go that way. Like you got to kind of stick with what we know, and what we know is Patrick Mahomes knows these spots so well. What an opportunity for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is his spot. This is his. If you think Goff has something to prove, it's peanuts compared to what Lamar Jackson has the opportunity to prove in this game.
I agree.
And that's going to be interesting to see as he goes up against what may be the best defense in the league this year, especially if they're healthy. We'll see what the injuries do. But how about that for Lamar? Because it looked like it was going sideways again for him in the Houston game. And then he got it turned around, and he was unbelievable in the second half. Where do you stand with Lamar as far as, legacy to this point? We know he's great. We know he's fantastic. He's going to win an MVP. He's proven that. But we've got a pretty big sample size here in the postseason. It feels like the pressure on him's pretty big in this game.
Yeah, I agree. The pressure is for sure there. And if you heard them talk about his halftime speech from the Texans game, I think he's 100% feeling the pressure to want to get the job done. And when you talk about the conversation around AFC quarterbacks and the hierarchy of those guys, they point to, Joe Burrow making it to the Super Bowl, being within a play of winning it. So I think that he definitely wants to be in that conversation. But I think to be in that conversation, you got to get those championships. And Lamar's a winner. You can look at his regular season percentage, and he's a winner everywhere that he's gone. So I think that he'll embrace that, which is why I am taking the Ravens to take care of business. I think, especially this time of year and these type of games, the defenses really are needed to step up. And I think when you look at Baltimore's defense and just all the different ways that they're able to play, they can match up so well. I think Marlon Humphrey will be available for this game as well. So I really think that between Lamar and him being able to run the ball, which Josh Allen did effectively, which I figured he would, and they're able to shorten that game for the Chiefs just like the Bills did, I think they'll be able to get that done. And they got Justin Tucker as a kicker. So I don't think we'll be worried about too many missed field goals or extra points. So I'm really feeling like this is Lamar's time. This is his game at home in Baltimore.
Lamar? Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. I just it's a factor. I mean, it is a factor though. Mahomes has through 6 years of his career, when you've been in this spot and you just consistently get it done and get it done and get it done, and people keep wanting to crown somebody else, but it's still Mahomes and it's going to be Mahomes. You going up against the MVP. I just think there's the pressure on Lamar here. And I don't know how he feels on that stuff, right? Like, because he's more reserved than a lot of guys. So he doesn't talk about that kind of stuff a ton, but it's got to be there. Like, it has to be there. If it's there for Jared Goff, who's already been to a Super Bowl, I look at Lamar with just like the weight of the world on his shoulders, because you've had this year where the offseason went oddly, right? And you had rumors of nobody wanting Lamar, and he comes back and he wins an MVP.
Right.
Is it all for naught if they don't win this game? Do the haters feel vindicated if they don't win this game? Maybe. Not that that's the end all be all, but it does. It's like that elephant that just kind of hangs out in the room. And he's young. He's way younger than people realize. But I do think there's a bit of pressure. And it's not so much even on them to win. Like, he just needs to play well, right? If he plays well and the Ravens still lose, I do think he'll get let off the hook, because now you've strung together that half and then another great game, because Josh Allen plays well and loses every time, right? We're not watching the Bills Chiefs thinking, oh man, that's Josh Allen's fault,
right,
or anything like that. But Lamar Jackson, some of their playoff losses over the years early in his career were his fault. He played terrible. And so I do think there is, and I don't think he has to win to shake that, but I do think he has to play well. And it's going to have to come against one of the best defenses and one of the best secondaries in football. It'll be with his legs in this game.
Yeah.
If Willie Gay's out and the Chiefs have those injuries, this is a game where as much as we've seen Jackson improve over his career, not as a pocket passer, but at doing that when he needs to, this is not one of those games, I don't think. I think this is a game where Lamar needs to run wild. If he gets a lane, you got to take it. Look what Josh Allen just did to the Chiefs.
Right.
I mean, they're showing you that that's the ticket. You got to run if you're Lamar Jackson in this game.
Absolutely. And use those tight ends, man, like we talked about last week. I've seen that they've got Mark Andrews back into the fold.
I was just about to ask you that.
So,
is he back?
I mean, he practiced last week.
That's a problem.
I mean,
that's a problem.
Him and Likely, the way they might be able to deploy those guys like Buffalo did, it's gonna be a good game, man. I'm looking forward.
They think Marlon Humphrey's going to be back too. Like, yeah, this is a tough spot for the Chiefs. I'm curious to get Dan's take. We'll do that again in the next hour. All right, what we're going to do, we may try to run down during the break here, Shreyas Laddha to help us with KU. KU wins last night against Cincinnati. We'll get Shreyas's take. If not, we'll break it down. They get it done. It was far from a convincing win. Cincinnati's good, but it was at home. I still just something's not quite right with KU for me. And again, we talked about it yesterday. This is when we're talking about national championship type aspirations. We'll get into the Jayhawks when we return on Sports Daily. It's Albracht. It's Malcolm Carter on a Tuesday. Don't go away. All right, and welcome back into Sports Daily here. Jacob Albracht, Malcolm Carter with you here in hour number one. Tres Lotta joining us fresh off of a KU win last night against Cincinnati, 74-69. KU gets it done. It's a bounce back from the loss over the weekend. Johnny Furphy's coming out party. Were you satisfied last night, Tres? Is that what you needed to see from KU after the loss in Morgantown, or did they still leave a little left on the bone there?
I think there's a little left on the bone there. I was impressed with their ability to grind out a victory against a pretty good team in Cincinnati. I think they're 33 and Ken Palm, and they have an elite defense. And Johnny Furphy had an incredible game. But I don't think the game should have been as close as it was in the first half. And it took some time for Kansas to create some separation. And there was always this weird feeling of the game kind of being close throughout. So that was definitely there. But, I've said it before with this Kansas team. They're not a team to blow out a lot of teams, and they rarely have blowouts, and they can lose on the road to anybody. So I guess the expectations of what I have for them have slightly lessened. They're not this dominant team that's going to run through the field and make a Final Four guaranteed, like I think preseason expectations were. Now I'm just wondering if they're going to win a Big 12 title with the way they've been inconsistent on the road at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you specifically about DeJuan Harris and really his role on offense, specifically as a scorer. Was really just kind of doing a deep dive on him and seeing that in the last 2 years, if he scored 6 or more points, KU's only lost one of those games. You just talk about like what he can bring maybe as a scorer on the offensive side, maybe to help the KU offense a little bit.
I think, for him, he's got to be more aggressive, right? He gets a lot of his points through, kind of scoop layups, floaters, stuff like that. He can be more aggressive shooting wise because he's a pretty good shooter. He's just hesitant to take those shots. because he's a guy who likes to defer. And, I think he can be a guy that Kansas can rely on to shoot from deep when they need him to, because they need that aggressive DeJuan Harris. And obviously on offense, he's a fantastic facilitator, but I think his assist or turnover rate is the highest it's been all his career. And on top of that, I think he's shooting like 41% or 42% at the rim. So those two things are really concerning. And I think that is kind of why DeJuan hasn't quite lived up to the play and expectation of what we have of what DeJuan Harris should be like.
Do you think, Shreya, this team, how much more does it have defensively? Because that to me, like when I saw this roster come together at the beginning of the year and you added Hunter Dickinson to 3 All-American type defenders, I kept thinking to myself that this defense will be the best defense in the country. Like it should be. But I don't think it is that. And I just wonder, and I know Bill Self teams get better defensively over the course of a season, but is this team capable of still reaching that lofty of an expectation? And maybe I was out of line with the expectation. I don't think I was. But I just wonder what do we think the ceiling still is for this team defensively?
I mean, I think it is pretty high, right? I know they were like 26 in Ken Palm heading into yesterday, and we saw how good they are defensively yesterday against Cincinnati. I mean, they let them shoot 16% from 3 on like 3 of 18. And on top of that, I think Cincy only shot 39% from the floor. So we see how good they are when they're connected, they're communicating, they're doing what they need to do. But we've also seen where they're a little out of sorts, whether it was against UCF or against, West Virginia. You can't give up 91 points. I don't care how good they're shooting from 3. 91 points is just kind of a disaster defensively, right? And Bill talked about it, how they were soft on ball screens and communication. So Kansas definitely has a pretty high defensive potential. Like I think this team, when it's locked in, it's top 5 defense in the nation, if not better. The issue is it's not always locked in, and I think that's why we've seen the inconsistency, along with so much of the already other problems of they don't take a lot of threes, they don't have a lot of bench scoring. Like the margin of error, I said it yesterday, for this Kansas team is so razor thin that if one or 2 things don't go their way, they're in danger of losing to inferior opponents. West Virginia was a quad 3 loss. That's pretty atrocious. And it's something that's going to haunt them come March when they're probably trying to compete for a 1 seed.
Yeah. I would love to hear your take on Furphy's game last night. I mean, when I'm watching the game, he doesn't look like he's 6'9". He looks like he's a tall, pretty lanky kid. But I mean, the way he jumps, I mean, his jumping ability is ridiculous. I mean, I think he had like 3 or 4 offensive rebounds that were really critical. And he really seems like he can be kind of that third scoring option for the team. Can you just talk about what his kind of offensive outlook could be for the team?
I mean, I think he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything, right? He's a sharpshooter, and he gets some really nice buckets on offensive rebounds. I mean, he's really sneaky athletic, I think, in the sense of, like you said, he doesn't look 6'9". Like he looks 6'7", 6'8". I don't know how to describe it, but he doesn't look as tall as 6'9". But it doesn't really matter because you said that bounce is just incredible. I mean, it led to 11 rebounds. He led the team in rebounds yesterday, and I think 4 of them were offensive, 5 of them were defensive, maybe. And, I mean, what he can add offensively, he can do a little bit of everything. He's a guy that seems to be constantly relocating off ball. I mean, kind of like what Grady Dick was doing last year to create open shots. He's a pretty decent facilitator. I mean, he doesn't have the ball in his hands long enough, I feel like, to make those moves, but it seems like the biggest thing with Johnny Furphy is when you have him on the court, he makes the winning / right play more often than not. And that's something I think Kansas didn't have with Albracht Jackson or Nick Timberlake or whoever else would have started in his place. And I think that's a testament to how good Furphy is as a freshman.
Yeah. So do you think he's then solidifying himself as the 5th starter? He started the game. He is we know they need they need a 5th, but they also need, like a 6th and maybe a 7th. But it sure seems like Furphy should be the guy in that 5th spot at minimum, right? Like he's pretty much solidified that, don't you think?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any, freaking like thoughts about it, to be honest with you. I mean, Bill said it himself. He was surprised that this guy's averaging 17 and 8 in the three games that he started. But I mean, like, just look at how much better this Kansas starting lineup looks with him in it. Like the guy's passing the ball. They like playing with him out there. It's something Bill's mentioned multiple times. And there's no disrespect to Marco Jackson. He's a fine young player. He's going to be pretty good, I think, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after. But it's clear that Spursy has gained the trust of his teammates quicker than anyone else could have had at this spot in time. And it's because he makes the right play at the right time. And this Kansas starting lineup is just so much more dynamic offensively with him out there. You can, fault him for being slow laterally and stuff like that. But even then, his length is so nice that he can still impact shots against other teams. So, it obviously has created a hole with the bench scoring with him off of it. But this Kansas starting lineup, like Bill said, depth matters until March. And when March hits, it's going to be, this team is going to probably look better than it does right now because they'll have some more time between games and more rest and longer half times and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think that when you're looking at a team holistically, I feel like you learn a lot more in losses than you do in wins. I think KU learned a lot about themselves against that in that loss against West Virginia. They have a pretty tough schedule going ahead for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So it seems like maybe they're riding the ship at the right time, and they kind of got a taste of that bitter loss. Can you just talk about going forward these next 2 weeks, how just your outlook on the team in terms of really how they're going to not only defend, but how they're going to really, when they're scoring at a high clip, they're a really hard team to beat.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think, they need to have the continued production of what Furphy has done for them. They need that because it's clear that he's kind of this energizer bunny for, this team in the sense of, like, they go out to really hot starts with him out there. I think they were slow a lot of times come out of the gate when he wasn't starting. So I think that's important. It's important that Kansas plays better defense than they played against West Virginia and UCF on the road. That means, making sure they don't get out rebounded like they did yesterday. Again, this was the second straight game. They got out rebounded. They got lucky in a lot of metrics because they had done just enough defensively to make sure it doesn't matter. But I mean, like, the bench needs to be better. It was a 30 to, 2, I think 32 to 2 bench point advantage I wrote about. And Kansas didn't score their first bench points until 10 seconds left in the game when Marco Jackson got fouled and calmly sank some free throws. So, like, the bench has got to be better. It cannot be giving you 0 points a game or 2 points a game or whatever until the last 10 seconds. So that's big. I think, the biggest thing for Kansas is consistency on the defensive end and getting some guys who can help them, score off the bench and making sure you don't lose a rebounding battle. I think those 2-3 things will be huge for Kansas and making sure that they come out of the next couple of weeks with a better outlook than they've had in the last 2 weeks.
Why would Shreyas Lotta joining us, our KU insider, beat writer for the KC Star on KU football and basketball. How on earth would Kansas ever lose a rebounding battle, by the way, with Adams, McCullough, and Dickinson? Like, how do they ever lose a rebounding battle?
I think you can see the tired legs, right? I mean, like, Hunter Dickinson had 2 rebounds at the half. I mean, he's been.
But they got crushed yesterday. They got crushed 40 to 29.
Really bad. Yeah, it was really bad. It was nuts, and they got crushed in the offensive board, 16-6. I mean, Cincy's a good rebounding team. Props to them, but there's no earth that Kansas should be losing that badly in the rebounding battle. It just shouldn't be happening. But it's clear that the minutes are playing a toll on these guys. I mean, and it's clear that they had some tired legs because McCullough, I think, had 0 rebounds at the half or whatever. I mean, he's a guy who averages 6.4 rebounds a game. Dickinson had 2 rebounds at the half. He ended up with 6. Not great for a guy who was putting up double-doubles just a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And KJ, for how good he's done a good job of, getting more rebounds, he didn't do an amazing job yesterday either. But you're right. Like, there's no kind of thought process on what, there's no reason for this Kansas team to be getting out rebounded
ever
as much as they are
with those three guys. Ever. Not with those three guys. I mean, it shouldn't happen. I asked that, like, look, KU. I still think KU wins the Big 12, Shreyas. But I feel like the expectations of a national championship have gone way down, and they've lost 3 games, right? They're 16-3, but there's something something just isn't quite right. And I guess is it fix? I don't even know what it is, but it's not what it should be. It doesn't feel like, even though they're 16-3. I know that sounds crazy to say, but I mean, are you feeling that?
I mean, I've been down on this team, I think, more than a lot of people have. Yesterday, I talked about it. The expectation of preseason of dominance or whatever to whatever's happening right now is just so different. And people can say, whatever, it's January, it's Bill Self, and they'll probably have them ready and get them better to play by come tournament time. But there's no, like, where we are right now, there's no way this team wins a title. Like, I just don't see them winning 8 straight games come March and, winning a national title. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they figure out some things. Maybe the first reemergence is what they needed. But there's just too many issues with this team, whether it's the fact that when the offense goes on these lulls, they go to Hunter Dickinson. And Hunter Dickinson's a good player, but he's a post player, so he's a lot easier to defend than a guy like Grady Dick or Jalen Wilson was last year. It feels like there's no easy offensive creation. A guy like Jalen would, take a tough mid-range shot and make it more often than not. Or same thing with Grady Dick. Kevin can do that sometimes, but he doesn't always do it. And on top of that, their 3-point shooting rate is the lowest ever in the Big South era by hundreds of, ranking spots, which is not good. You can't win college basketball games not taking threes and making a decent amount. I'm not saying, that they won't make a run if it comes, but like, I just look at this team and, it feels like every other week a work pops out. And, some of the stuff is just effort level stuff like rebounding and, turnovers and stuff like that they can fix. But there's other stuff that I just don't know how it gets fixed. The lack of bench production, unless Nick Timberlake steps up and consistently gives you 2 games, which he's yet to do, which are good, is a little bit concerning. And I think I agree. They're probably going to win the Big 12 title because Bill Self is the best coach in the nation, and he will have these guys ready to go and run through a wall and all that. But I like the idea that this team will win a title right now in January 23rd or 24th, whatever day it is, is kind of asinine to me. And I'm a metrics guy, but I'm also an eye test guy. And between both of those things, this Kansas team does not look like the team that's going to win a title. They're Ken Palm, 18 or something like that. I don't think they're that bad, but I don't think they're a top 5 team in the nation right now with the way they're playing.
Yeah, and the thing is, and Bill Self turns teams from the difference between January 23rd and February 23rd typically is massive for KU. It's why they win so many Big 12 titles. We'll see if they can get it done. You can find Shreyas' work at the KC Star. You can follow him on social media. Shreyas, we appreciate it. Thanks for the Tuesday visit as we get ready for KU's next one, which will come, in pesky Ames against Iowa State on Saturday, a 12:30 tip. We appreciate it, Shreyas. We'll talk again next week.
See you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There goes Shreyas Laddha. We always appreciate that. If you missed any of that conversation on the game last night, you can go back and listen for free on the Odyssey app. We will likely have a little more on that when Tommy joins us in the second hour, kind of continuing the conversation we had yesterday. As KU gets the win. Looks the win at home. 5 points against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's pretty good. Just still doesn't feel quite right for Kansas. Hey, on the way out here, let's give away some HTO. We'll give you a free iced tea and a free Brewhouse coffee right now to our first caller on the KFH hotline at 869-1240. The tea is good for Wichita's East and West locations and in Derby. The coffee good for the Wichita East location and in Derby. Good luck. We'll get a winner. Jad will have that. We'll come back with more Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. We make our way through this Tuesday, getting ready for championship weekend, looking back at a KU game, more coming up. I do want to get your take, Malcolm, on the Shockers real quick. 0-5 to start the league. It has been not good. I just don't know what's out there still for this team. What have you seen from Wichita State? And, you know, as somebody who's just sort of new to the area, what were your expectations for it coming into the year?
So I've been here for a few years now, so I've been able to. I've seen the program kind of go through. I would say a lot of people say it's probably their biggest rough patch in a while. So I've definitely have had kind of that objective view of how things have been going on with the team. And I mean, because I'm not holding it to the standard of the quote unquote glory days, it's easy for me to say I think the team has a lot of potential to grow. I think when we're talking about, and Darvin Ham said this in an interview about the Lakers, like when you don't have people in the lineups and you can't figure out a lineup with so many people in and out, I think it's hard to really develop a real rapport with the guys on the court with you. I think that they have looked better with Bijan on the court, which I expected with him not being out and all the transfers that they brought in. So for me, I would say, kind of pump the brakes a little bit on the Shockers. There weren't high expectations going into the season, but I think they'll be fine going forward. But this season for sure is not. There's not much left. But I will think that you'll see a lot of players start to develop, and they're getting used to Paul Mill's system. And I think they'll be fine.
You've been here a couple of years, but you've missed the glory days of Wichita State, certainly, when the Shockers are the hottest ticket in town and, you can't get a ticket to Coke Arena and all of these things. As I watched Cincinnati last night playing a great game against KU, and I watched the success of Memphis, and I feel like these are programs that, not only did Wichita State very recently play in the same league as them, like, that's where the program needs to be, right? That needs to be the expectation for Wichita State basketball. You're a metropolitan school, much like those two schools, much like Creighton, right, in Omaha. And they just, for whatever reason, can't seem to get back to that point. And again, it's only year one under Paul Mills. I get it, but I just I need that buzz. It's so big for the community here, and I hope that they get back there. I don't know what's going to come this year. 0-5 to start the league. Boy, that's not inspiring. And I know it's top heavy, it's front heavy, but it doesn't really get easy, right? As we look at the league, there's not a ton of games where you say, "Oh yeah, that's because they lost to Temple," right? That's the one where it's like, what that. I just don't know, I guess, how much better it's going to get this year. And I worry about that. I worry about that for the buzz of this community, and I want it to be there.
So the last 2 weeks, you haven't seen, much from the guys. I think definitely in that FAU game, I saw.
It's not that I haven't seen much. I haven't seen wins.
Right.
I mean, at some point, you got to win games. They haven't won very many, and it's been what, 1 in the last 9, 1 in the last 10. That's a long stretch now, and I get it. The schedule's tough. But Wichita State shouldn't be the victim of a tough schedule. That's not Shocker basketball, right? You go win some of those games. Yeah, they've had leads against FAU, and they've had leads against Memphis, and they've done all of these things, and they've won exactly 0 of those games. That's over time. That's kind of hard to swallow.
No, absolutely. I definitely understand. But I think as the season goes on, I think when we're looking at the season as a total, once we're done, I think that we'll look back at this final stretch and we'll say, hey, I think they're going to get a win out of one of these games. They're going to be like, whoa. That's really what I see from this team. Those guys, they look hungry, especially some of those new guys, man. They look hungry. I think they want to pull one out, and it's going to happen soon.
Well, but that's not, I mean, we can't be like, oh, good, they finally got a win. It needs to string together, right? They need to pile them up here. And the one thing I agree with you with for sure is it doesn't look like anybody's lost focus or anything's spiraling away from them, which we have, I think, seen, if we're being honest with ourselves, over the past couple of years. There were points where it was I'm not sure how I don't think that's happening. I'm worried more about the fans not being all in than the team. That's what I'm worried about, because it's hard to watch when, you got to get some wins in this thing, and they got to get it turned around quickly. 0-5. That's not going to cut it. So we'll see what happens there. Did want to get your take on that. All right. Well, I believe we'll have Tommy in here as we get into hour number 2. Congratulations to Herb. Now, when it's a name, is it Herb or Herb? I think it's Herb, right?
Herb.
It's usually Herb.
Yeah, it's Herb.
Hard H. Okay. Just making sure. Herb or Herb. We appreciate you listening to the show, and congratulations on the win. Enjoy that HTO on us. We'll come back. We'll have more on the Chiefs. Probably a little more on KU, and we'll look around elsewhere. Look, there's a lot of NFL openings, and all these big-time head coaches we're talking about, none of them are taking jobs yet. Why do we think that is? We'll get into that in the second hour here of Sports Daily. Albracht, Malcolm Carter, Tommy Castor coming back in. We'll see you in a minute.
1240 KFH. Kansas City!
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, we have you covered. Joining Sports Daily Live, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, and we do welcome in our weekly visit with Dan Israel, fresh off another trip, another win to the AFC Championship game. Dan, another classic there in Buffalo. Great game, entertaining game, and history repeats itself as it's been a long time since the Chiefs have not played in this game this weekend. How are you this morning?
I'm good, man. I'm a little beat up from the fans in Buffalo, but hey, man, we got out of there the way we wanted, which was with the victory, so that's good.
Did you go through some tables, Dan, or what'd you get into up there in Buffalo?
I'm telling you, man. First of all, it's a great atmosphere. I mean, it's real football, man. You know, they're tailgating hours before. I think we went in at about 6 or 7 hours before kickoff, and fans were already out in what was less than ideal weather tailgating. And it reminds me a lot of Arrowhead fans. They're a little more They're a little less polite.
Yeah, throwing
they
snowballs. I love it.
Yeah, it was a little tough, but I think even Mahomes enjoyed it. I think he enjoyed being the villain.
Yeah, I do too. I really think that they thrived in that. I wondered, we talked about this in the last hour, when you have all of that emotion for that one, I wonder if there's any hangover effect now to have to do it again in Baltimore, because they're not your best friends either up there in Baltimore, and they haven't been here in a while. So, how do you keep that same energy going for another week when, it was all you heard about going on the road in Buffalo, and now guess what? You get to turn around and do it again against a better team.
Yeah, Jacob, I think that's a very valid premise, and you see teams every season do that. In fact, the Lions worried me with that. They have such a hype having a home playoff game, and I remember what that was like, and I think it was 91 or 92, and the first playoff game Arrowhead Stadium had ever seen, and we had a great victory. We beat a team, and then we couldn't go past that. So the letdown's very real. You see it every year. I think this is where the championship DNA that the Chiefs have versus a playoff DNA is really going to come into play. They have so much experience going all the way to the Super Bowl. Let's face it, Mahomes has never not been to the AFC Championship since he started, since he's been a starter. And so I feel like they've got a good shot at combating that and controlling that. Now, look, there's a lot of young guys on the Chiefs team as well, but the nice thing about having veterans that have been there and done that is hopefully they can control the fact that this whole game has to take another notch up from where it was in Buffalo. Can't just be where it was in Buffalo. Certainly can't come down. It's got to go up.
Dan, how concerned were you about the way that the game started on Sunday against the Bills? Just the Bills came out, tons of energy, marched down the field. The defense didn't particularly start out the game very well. I had a thought at one point, I'm like, oh no, here we go. Like Buffalo's got the momentum. But then, of course, things started to change. The momentum kind of shifted back to Kansas City. But the way that game started, what were your thoughts early on in that game?
It's funny, Tom, because one of my guys struggles with remaining focused on the broadcast versus getting drawn into the football drama, which is tough for us, especially when these games mean something. It's not just a regular season or preseason game. This is big stuff. So we spoke before, and I said, look, keep in mind, this game is going to go down to the fourth quarter. Just ignore the first, second, and third quarters. Just ignore them. Yeah. It's going to go down to the fourth quarter. It always does with these two quarterbacks. And it may not be 40 to 35 like we, used to see, but it's going to go down to the fourth quarter. I guarantee it. The other thing I think has been I feel like the Chiefs defense uses that first quarter to kind of test the water and figure out what's going on. I always feel like they play less intently in the first quarter than they do the second, and then they turn it on in the third and fourth quarters and just become this smothering, suffocating defense that no team can get by. I don't care what you do, how you do it, you're not going to get by. And so for me, I wasn't panicked. I will say, as a general fan, I think that was probably a concern when you're getting field goals instead of touchdowns. That can come back to bite you on a team that is as prolific and as strong as the Buffalo Bills or the Baltimore Ravens. You don't want to see that, but I just feel like with Allen and Mahomes, it just seems like it's going to be the fourth quarter. Whatever happens in the fourth quarter, it's going to be neck and neck. And I thought it was interesting. A TV showed a stat at halftime that between the Allen and Mahomes era contests, which I think was 7 of them, something like that, that the Bills had scored 179 points and the Chiefs had scored 179 points. So we just really match up well with the Bills. And so I wasn't too panicked, but you never want to see them slow start. But I just felt like with that game, it was going to be in the end.
Yeah, you brought up field goals, Dan. I'm telling you, I've rewired my brain, much like I think the Chiefs have. I'm like embracing them. I'm all in on field goals because I don't think this is the team that needs to go for it on 4th and 3 inside the 20. I think they're fine with field goals because I think their defense is fantastic. And I just like, and they stuck to it, right? They have, and it's working. And outside of a questionable play call on a sweep play to McCole Hardman, they really are sticking to this plan. It's not conservative, but I think it's just a plan of letting your defense win you a game. And I do think field goals are a part of that and taking less risk maybe than what we've seen for years and years with this squad.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we always hear the axiom. I mean, for 35 years, I've heard the axiom, defense wins championships. And I think that the Chiefs are embracing that. In Buffalo, in particular, the Chiefs lost the time of possession brutally, 2-1. The Bills had the ball 40 minutes of the game, Chiefs 20. I mean, that's unheard of. They had twice as many snaps. I think they had 79 snaps for the Bills. The Chiefs had 47 or something like that. And keep in mind that at the end of the game, 3 or 4 of those were kneel downs. So they literally had half the offense that the Bills did. But look, when you can be as effective as they were on first and second down, and guys, 5 third downs total for the Chiefs last Sunday in Buffalo. That's amazing. That means they were getting an effectiveness in the first and second down that we haven't seen the Chiefs do, maybe save the Jets game this year. I mean, it was really nice to see them getting 7 yards a play. But the point here is that, they are kind of just embracing the fact that they don't have to go out and win the game on offense. They can go out and score a little bit and let defense just smother out the opponent. And it's an awkward situation for those of us who've been Chiefs fans watching this team for the past few years, but it does work, and it is working. And so hopefully that's what they're going to do in Baltimore as well, because I'd hate to see them, kind of panic on this. I feel like with Pacheco, the way he's running, the way the running game is working, let's just ride this wave all the way.
I'll bring up the elephant in the room here, Dan. McCole Hardman, not a good game, and I think that's putting it lightly. With the 2 touches that he had, 2 fumbles, of course, that crucial one reaching out to the goal line. What do you do moving forward? I mean, I know that the effort, wasn't great, but on top of that, the play call was awful as well. I thought, trying to do a reverse with him to get into the end zone in that situation. What do you take away from that whole sequence of events?
Yeah, so let's break that apart, because I think there are 2 kind of issues with this. And the first is 100% fumble rate is not good. I'm sorry, but that guy isn't getting a touch the rest of the game from me as if I'm calling plays. I know they like to give the guys, a second and third chances and stuff, but there is just something going on with the hands of some of our guys, and the focus and the ball security is just so important, and they put so much emphasis on it. Why is he struggling with this still late in the season? I don't understand. To the other point about why they called that play, I agree. When you've got Pacheco being as effective as you can, and you're as close to the goal line as we were, it makes more sense to. Now, Pacheco, I think, came out. I think he had an ankle or shoe issue or something, but you could have put Clyde Edwards in there and, just smash the ball into the end zone. To me, a lot more secure than throwing the ball. I always talk about, Lynn Dawson taught me a long time ago. He said, whenever you throw the ball, 3 things can happen, and 2 of those are bad. And so, to me, it was a little bit of a too cute a call, but I will also tell you that Hardman's had a lot of success with that play. He's done that. That's a play he's run for years, with us. And it just was a dumb move for him to try to reach over the goal, and especially with this rule, which I don't understand the rule still, but it is what it is, and they know that. And so you've got to, especially when you're at the corner of the end zone, where 1.5 feet can be a fumble out of the end zone. You have to protect the football, and Hardman's a veteran enough to know that. And so it was disappointing for sure.
Yeah, it was, but they survived it, and I bet you they don't try it again. What does it take in Baltimore? Lamar Jackson has a big, elephant in the room with his playoff performances, but he shook that in the second half against Houston. I look at him this year and what he's done, but it's almost like he's going to kick it old school in this game if the Ravens are going to be successful and run. They ran it, Dan, like 43 times against what has been one of the best run defenses in football in Houston. They didn't care. They ran it 43 times anyway. The Chiefs have not been good against the run this year, and Willie Gay is questionable. That's a concern for me. How do the Chiefs get the ball in their own hands and give themselves enough chances when you know that's what Baltimore is going to try to do?
Yeah, Jacob, it's interesting. You mentioned that the Chiefs somehow survived the Hardman fumble. They made their opportunities. I really think that's a hallmark, a trademark of good teams. They somehow manufacture opportunities. Now, did the Chiefs waste a few of those? Yep. Did the Bills waste a few of those? Yes. But they somehow managed to manufacture more. They're going to have to do that exact same thing in Baltimore, and for the reasons you just mentioned. Josh Allen is different than Lamar Jackson, both rushing quarterbacks, both big quarterbacks, but Lamar Jackson can outrun probably 95% of the people on the field. He is fast, and he can be explosive. He has cuts like a runner. Josh Allen's just big and gets going. He's like a freight train, hard to bring down. But Lamar Jackson's a whole different level of that. I mean, there was talk at, I think Jackson in the year he was drafted at the combine about making him into a running back. That's how shifty and fast this guy is now. He's not near big enough, in my opinion, to be a running back. He's tall enough. Certainly he's too tall probably for a running back. But I think he's definitely a threat that they're going to have to figure out with giving up, what was it, 180 yards on the ground or something? It was a crazy number in Buffalo. However, to your point, they survived that. And so they're going to have to survive Jackson probably getting 100 yards on them. What does that mean? It means we're going to have to rely on Harrison Butker. We're going to have to get at least halfway on the field. We're going to have a number of possessions where we, make some magic happen. And I think that, for the Ravens, they're a pretty complete team. This is I said about the Ravens for probably the past 4 or 5 years, especially under Jackson, that the problem with Lamar Jackson is he couldn't stand in the pocket and throw an accurate pass. And you can't win in the National Football League if you can't do that at some point. Scrambling is fine, but we've got RG3 to prove that it doesn't work just to run the football from the quarterback position. So I always said, if he could stay in the pocket and throw an accurate pass, they would be a dangerous team. Well, that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's able to throw a Patrick Mahomes type accuracy from the pocket, and he's patient back there. So I think that Spagnuolo is going to have to dial up packages that just are confusing beyond belief, because I don't think they're going to, if they don't confuse him where to throw, he's going to deliver the ball to an open receiver, and it's going to be a deep ball because he can throw it at, 50, 60 yards. We saw that in both the playoff or this last playoff game, and we saw it in the regular season. So I think the Ravens are a dangerous threat, man. It's going to take all hands. They got to minimize their mistakes. And like I said, they're going to have to manufacture some opportunities here, because this is a good Ravens team. This will be probably the hardest test I think the Chiefs faced this entire season.
Well, Dan, I don't think that you can overstate also the importance of what Steve Spagnuolo does at halftime and the adjustments that he makes. I mean, just the number of points that the Kansas City defense has allowed in the second half since week 14. They haven't allowed more than 7 points in the second half since that time. And so, in a first half where Buffalo kind of gashed them and ran all over them and all of that, the adjustments were made, I think, in the second half to be able to limit what Buffalo did. And they're going to have to do that, I think, over the course of 4 quarters against Baltimore. What do you think about just overall the way that, and we've talked about it before, but as we're in the playoffs, the way that Spagnuolo makes those adjustments and really tries to find different ways to confuse opposing offenses?
Yeah, he's a bit of a freak with it, isn't he? I mean, he just, I've always thought Belichick was a defensive genius. I'm going to put Steve Spagnuolo in that same category. And frankly, guys, and I don't want this getting out. I don't think you guys want to get out. I don't know why he's not being considered for a head coach somewhere. I mean, he's just done such a fantastic job. Now, I know he didn't have a lot of success as a head coach prior, but he's done such an amazing job with this defense and young guys. I mean, this defense is so young, with the exception of Chris Jones. This is going to be a defense for a number of years, and I feel so fortunate that he's back there and he's doing this, you know, the design of this defense, because he is really gifted with both his. You know, I always think, like, with coaches, you either have a scheme and you try to fit players into your scheme, or the good ones get good players and figure out how to make a scheme. I would say, like with Marty Schottenheimer, he could make a winning poker hand no matter what cards he was dealt. And I really think that's important. I would contrast that, like, to the Dick Vermeil era with the Chiefs, where we were going for a full house every time. So we were dumping cards trying to get, you know, a full house every time. You know, we just keep changing cards. We need a full house because a full house will win. That's, you know, statistically, we know a full house is a good winning poker hand. I think good coaches do it the other way around, and Spagnuolo has done that. And I think I told you guys last week against the or 2 weeks ago against the Dolphins. I told him in the locker room, I said, that was amazing. You held the Dolphins to 7 points, you know, and he said, yeah, I can't believe we gave up that touchdown. He was so focused on the one score that he gave them, not the 3 that they prevented or the 4 that they prevented. But I think that's the mentality of his defense, and that permeates all the way down to the players. Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, you know, Nick Bolton, Justin Reed, I think they all feel that same thing. They don't want to give up a single point.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing about Spags. He's done an incredible job. He's going to have to do an even more incredible job if they don't have Willie Gay. Before we let you go, Dan, what's your gut say on Gay's status for Sunday?
Yeah, you know, he sits a couple of seats in front of me on the plane. And first of all, Jacob, you're right. I mean, he's played, especially against the run, he's played well. And I think, you know, Drew Tranquil has played well when they're in there together, you know, with Nick Bolton versus, you know, Willie Gay being out there by, you know, just Willie and Nick. But it's you know, if he can't go, it's going to be significant. I do think they do a great job of next man up and figuring that out. I don't know what the answer is there, because it's concerning. I will also tell you, as I mentioned, he sits in front of me. I think this is a character. I don't think there's any way you're going to keep him out of that game unless he's got, you know, something so severe that it's career threatening. It's just like I said, the mentality of these guys. And I think Willie's one of those guys, having been through this. He knows how important this game is. He knows he can rest in 3 weeks. So if there's any way possible Willie Gay can play, he will play.
And it will be a key in the game. All right, Dan, we've got coverage of the game beginning. What, at noon? Is that right, on Sunday? Or what time are you guys getting things started on the broadcast?
Yeah, so we'll have a noon noon start for you guys on the network. And unfortunately, you know, it's a Westwood One kind of thing. We don't like that at all, but that's what it is what it is. The league structures the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl differently, but nevertheless, we're going to try to have a good pregame for you guys and a good postgame. So hopefully it'll at least feel a little Chiefs football.
It'll be good, whatever we can get, Dan. We appreciate it. Safe travels again now to Baltimore. We'll see if the high from last Sunday can carry over into this one. But it'll be a party. It'll be fun, and we're looking forward to it. Dan, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Go Chiefs.
There goes Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. You can go back and listen to any of that if you missed it for free on the Odyssey app. So make sure to check that out. Looking forward to just some of the stuff Dan talked about there. Like this will be a fascinating strategic matchup between two coaches who work together for a long time, know each other well. You're talking about some of the best in the business at it, going head to head directly in this game. I cannot get a good feel for this one, Tommy. I was very confident in the Chiefs against the Bills. I still like the Chiefs in this game, but it's not that way. Like, it's not this dominant thought in my head. We'll get into it when we come back. We'll make our way through. Want to get Tommy's thoughts on the KU game last night, as he is now back in the chair here for us. So we'll do that. Albracht and Castor, Sports Daily, rolling right along. All right, welcome back in, everybody. So what Dan Israel was alluding to there, just to make sure everybody understands, when you get to this point in the playoffs, the local broadcasts don't go outside of the local market. So Kansas City has that. For us here, we'll get pre and post game, and then we'll have Westwood One's broadcast, which are always great. Those will simulcast now. So the national call on KFH and KNSS. KNSS, though, will have the pre and post game there of the Chiefs radio network.
Is that a Kevin Harlan call, by the way? Do we know? Is that?
I don't know who's on it this week, but Harlan's on a lot of them,
Yeah.
and he's one of my favorites. So it's great. I mean, it'll still be great. You can still find it right here on KFH and over on KNSS. I'm seeing some stuff today, Tommy, and this happens, and it's not unusual for the Chiefs beat to lose their mind when they're taken any, for some reason, like personal offense to things. But I guess there's some guy, and I don't even know who it is, still saying today that he would take Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes. So what you'll see happen today is you'll see this barrage of people. Like if you don't have commentary defending Patrick Mahomes, violently, then you're not really it's a strange thing that happens among the Chiefs beat. So whoever that is going to get exactly what they want, which is some run, and some viral stuff. Is it really that outrageous, though? Like, do you really need to stop what you're doing in a day to defend Patrick Mahomes if somebody says they'd still take Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes? Like, Josh Allen's awesome. And it has not been Josh Allen's fault in these games that they've lost these games. It's okay for somebody to prefer this unicorn physical specimen, right? I don't think that's so aggressive. Now, would I do it? Of course I wouldn't. I think Patrick Mahomes is probably the best quarterback that's ever played football. But it's not so egregious to need to lose your mind publicly that somebody would even entertain the thought that maybe they would take Josh Allen in a vacuum over Patrick Mahomes.
I don't lose my mind publicly about that because I feel bad for the people who think that because it's objectively not true. It's objectively not true. So I don't lose any sleep over it. I feel bad for the people who believe that. I feel sorry for them when they think that, but I don't need to lose my mind publicly because I know it's objectively not true.
This is the same thing that used to happen with early Brady versus Manning, right? It was like, you got to take a side here. You got to be either Brady or Manning. And it was a great debate. I made a young career in radio off of that debate because I didn't know what else to do. It was so much fun to talk about, right? But that's sort of what it is. Yeah, Allen doesn't have it yet, just like Manning didn't have it yet. But you couldn't objectionably. You couldn't watch football. Objectively. What the hell am I trying to say? You couldn't watch football and just definitively say that Brady was better than Manning, but Brady was winning all the big games, right? But if you watch, your eyes tell you that Manning's still an incredible quarterback, and it was totally reasonable to take Manning in that scenario. So I get, and I haven't listened to what this guy said, but yeah, I mean, I think that it is an interesting discussion to have in a vacuum, right? Allen versus Mahomes, you're starting a team, that whole thing, you're starting a draft, you have to start from scratch. You don't have Andy Reid to pair with Patrick Mahomes. You don't have Travis Kelce, all of those things. Would Allen be close? I think he's probably pretty close. Josh Allen has been unbelievable in his career. And it's like we've got, I don't know, is it Cam Newton as a better passer? I don't know what the comp is because we haven't really seen anybody like Josh Allen before. In a lot of the ways, we haven't seen anybody like Patrick Mahomes, right? And the things that make Patrick Mahomes great, Josh Allen runs like he does, has the size that he does. I mean, he's as big as Ben Roethlisberger, can throw that way, but can run like Cam Newton did, like this. So it's not like some, death penalty to suggest that you might still prefer him. He hasn't been the problems and the reasons that he can't. I mean, he's beaten Patrick Mahomes 3 out of 7 times, right? They're 4-3 now, and in the postseason it didn't go his way. But I also think Travis Kelce
in the postseason.
I know, but but don't you think that you need to give a little credit to Travis Kelce and Andy
Sure.
Reid and some of the
Tyreek
advantages that
Hill,
the Chiefs
Tyreek
have
Hill
had
over the years.
Yeah,
Absolutely. The defense.
that's not Josh Allen's. That's not Josh Allen's
So
fault.
here's where I land on all of this. You know, I mentioned feeling bad for the people who think that Josh Allen is better than Patrick Mahomes, but more than anything, I feel bad for Josh Allen himself because
Yes,
here's why. Josh Allen is one of the greatest quarterbacks to play football. Unfortunately, he's in the same era as the greatest to play football. Right? You know, so Patrick Mahomes is the greatest. Josh Allen is one of the greatest. That's the difference between the two. It doesn't mean that one is amazing and the other one is garbage. Like, both things can be true at the same time. I also don't believe that you can objectively say that Josh Allen is better and that you should prefer Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes because Patrick Mahomes is that unicorn, but it's not one is great and one is terrible. They're both incredible. It's just one is the greatest of all time, in my opinion.
I agree. But again, like if I put on tape and watched quarterbacks play, I'll bet you that there are a lot of people that if you were not knowing anything about their careers, right, and what games have been won and everything, you're strictly just watching tape, there would probably be plenty of scouts that would say, yeah, I'd take Josh Allen. I would guess that that's the case. Now, obviously, outcomes of games and these things matter, and the big plays and the big moments and all of it. I think your point is good that he just so happens to be playing, but I do think Josh Allen will get one at some point. I think their rebuild is going to be tough for a couple of years.
That roster is going to look significantly different next season than it did this season because, I mean, they've got a ton of free agents and they're over the cap, you know, and so they've got to figure out, I don't know if it's a fire sale. I don't exactly know what it looks like, but they're going to have to make some major, hard, difficult decisions on how they want to rebuild this roster.
The same type that the Chiefs had to make 2 years ago. And so while, again, and just I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback who's ever played football. So understand that that's what I feel about Patrick Mahomes. But at the same time, understand that in head-to-head meetings, Josh Allen has won almost half of them. Understand that I know the playoff games. I understand. But also understand that in this most recent meeting, they were down like 5 defensive starters. And their best pass catchers were out. Like, these things matter when we evaluate quarterbacks.
But that's why
quarterbacks.
You said it before. Like, when you view this in a vacuum, and that's what you have to do, I think, to be able to compare and contrast the two, because you can't start throwing in other outside factors when you're comparing quarterbacks by themselves.
I know, but wins are also not something that exist in a vacuum like that because they don't play head-to-head against each other, right? It's not like Josh Allen gets out there defensively and can't stop Patrick Mahomes or vice versa. So it's okay to just watch the quarterbacks play and have the opinion that Josh Allen could be better. It reminds me so much.
Josh Allen is great, but he's not better.
But better is such a. I agree with you. What I don't agree with is acting like it's so insane to think it. It was not insane to think it with Manning over Tom Brady. It was not insane to think it with Marino over Joe Montana, right? Like, it wasn't insane. Do you think Jim Kelly's better than Troy Aikman? Right? Is that really a crazy thing to say? Because I think Jim Kelly probably was better than Troy Aikman. But Troy Aikman got the Super Bowls. Why? Because that was one of the best rosters we have ever seen exist in this game. I think we overthink sometimes. Well, we overreact to. We don't. Some people do. And I think it's like Chiefs Kingdom. It's fine. It's okay that some people watch film and think Josh Allen's a little bit better. It's okay that people might think.
But
on tape, I don't think he is either, but I could see where people think he is. I mean, he had a better year this year.
How many interceptions did Josh Allen throw this year? He threw 18.
I don't know.
18 interceptions this year. Now, he cleaned it up down the stretch. He didn't throw as many, as the
How many did Mahomes throw? 15, 16?
14. At 14 interceptions, 4 fewer than Josh Allen did.
again, don't misunderstand me on any of this. Patrick Mahomes, I think, is the best quarterback that's ever played. Okay, I think that wholeheartedly. What I don't get though, and look, somebody getting on TV and still beating that drum is doing it for this reason right here. I understand that too. Like, this is exactly what they're trying to go, or they're just being stubborn, right? And it's like, no matter what, I'll take him over, Mahomes or whatever. It's
I mean,
not.
Allen had more yards and more touchdowns, but he also had more interceptions. And so of course then you can look at, okay,
you got to think of him as a runner too, though.
Sure, I get all of it, but then if you're looking at the overall body of work, everything all put together, how many rings does Mahomes have? How many MVPs does Mahomes have? How many Pro Bowls does Mahomes have? So like there are some other accolades and things like that you can totally look at the overall body of work.
I'm not taking Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes, but I would take Josh Allen over a lot. And I think when I'm just trying to pull up what his rushing numbers were this year, I mean, he had a lot, and that's a part of his game. And Patrick Mahomes is an underrated runner. I think we've established that. You and I both feel that way.
He was actually down in rushing yards from the last couple of years, 524 rushing yards on the ground. He had 763 and 762 in the 2 previous years. So over 200 yards fewer this season than he had 2 years ago.
How many rushing touchdowns did
he
have
15.
This year?
He got in the end zone a lot more. He had 15 rushing touchdowns.
So add that to his touchdown total, right? And that's something I think that is also important to do. And you look at a year where it's like, yeah, he probably had a better regular season. Now, Mahomes went to his place and beat him. Right? And so that's obviously important. And we'll go through this with Joe Burrow too, probably, if he can stay healthy. That's been his problem so far in his career. But just understand that we are in this next quarterback renaissance. The last one we had was Brady Manning, right? Brady Manning and then Rodgers kind of in there at the same time. I don't think it's egregious to look at Brady, Manning, Rodgers and say any of those guys are your pick that you think was the best quarterback. Now, Brady's the GOAT because of the championships. But I think at the same time, in the same light, you can take this, and those two are at the forefront of it, right? And to look at it and just prefer one's game over the other, I don't think is that crazy, because Josh Allen really didn't have much to do with the loss.
I mean, we're
to Kansas City.
Also, if we're comparing and contrasting Mahomes and Allen with passing, just looking at them as pure passers, Allen did throw for more yards, but Mahomes had a higher completion rate. Mahomes also had a higher quarterback rating. And we're talking about a team that has, I think we can both say, a lot fewer weapons to catch the football than the Bills have. Bills have Steph Diggs. I know Gabe Davis was banged up, but Khalif Shakir, he turned into somebody that looked like to be, a pretty solid option. So, I think that with what Mahomes had to work with this year, and even over the course of his career, Josh Allen has never sniffed 5,000 yards passing, and Mahomes has done it twice. So if we're looking at, I don't care if we're looking at just this season or the overall career and the body of work. If we're just talking pure passer, Mahomes is absolutely better.
Yeah, agreed. Pure passer, there's no doubt about it. But that's not Allen's complete game. By the way, Rashee Rice was just as good as Steph Diggs was this year, and Travis Kelce's Travis Kelce. So I don't know that. I think you might be overrating Josh Allen's weapons a little bit this year. Rice had more touchdowns and almost as many yards. Diggs wasn't very good. Allen's done a lot of what he's done this year, kind of despite his weapons. The young tight end is okay. Dalton Kincaid was pretty good. Gabe Davis has been hurt / non-existent for a lot of it. I think he's also, similar to Mahomes, been great despite some deficiencies on the roster. I think Josh Allen is incredible. I don't think there's anybody like him, and I don't think it's quite to the level of overreaction the other way when people still defend him. And there are people, I never would have thought Josh Allen would be this polarizing quarterback, because I just watch him and I'm like, this dude's
he's a polarizing
awesome.
quarterback.
I do.
He's a great quarterback. but he's not the
There
greatest.
are very
and that's
there.
okay.
Oh no, he's not the greatest. There are very prominent names out there right now that are trying to say, like, he's only getting this credit because he's white. He's only getting credit because, like, he's Dante Culpepper. Like, there is some Josh Allen hate coming out the last few days. See, I told you so. You told us what? He got beat by the best, and he didn't really have anything to do with the loss. He was making great plays down the stretch. So what are the Josh Allen haters trying to prove?
Josh Allen reminds me a lot of Brett Favre in just kind of the gunslinger, go out there and make things happen. And Brett Favre was one of the great quarterbacks of
Josh
our
Allen's
generation.
so much better than Brett Favre.
I'm just comparing. He's got kind of that gunslinger mentality. Sometimes the decision making is not always there. That's a knock on Josh Allen. It always has been. Brett Favre had that too. Brett Favre was great. Josh Allen is great. It's okay. I'm not saying that he's not a great quarterback. He absolutely is. There are some knocks on him, and I think that decision making and
for sure,
the way that he plays and closes out games in the fourth. He had 2 interceptions, or not. He had 2 incompletions in the fourth quarter on Sunday.
Yeah,
could have won the game for Buffalo.
I never thought he would be as good as he is, and maybe that's why I'm so pleasantly surprised by how good he's become. Because I didn't think he's going to make it. He wasn't accurate at all. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger that can run. Same kind of gunslinger, huge arm, massive body, except he can run. I don't know. It's interesting today. So get ready for that. You'll see that all day, and we just spent an entire segment on it, unplanned. So I love the discussion. By the way, they broke records with viewership on the game. That's why. It's that rivalry. It's Allen Mahomes. Give it to me every year. Give me some combination of those two and Joe Burrow every year in the playoffs, please, because I love it and I can't get enough of it like most of us here. All right, let's come back. I want to get Tommy's thoughts on KU last night. We'll do that next as we roll forward on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back in. Sports Daily here. One more thing on the Mahomes thing. I've been stewing on this prediction for a while, and I can't quite get to the finish line on it, but there will be some prediction from me of insane passing numbers for Mahomes next year. And I say that even before they make changes in the offseason to the offense, but I think they're going to have it because I don't think their defense will be nearly as good next year. Okay. Real quick on KU, Tommy, we spent a lot of time on them when we talked to Shreyas in the first hour. Is that sort of win last night against Cincinnati that inspires the kind of confidence that puts them back into the national championship picture for you? I mean, it's a good win, but I don't know if it doesn't for me.
I mean, it's a good win. It was, I think, a little bit cozier than what we would have liked to see it be. But no, I mean, I think that I never took them out of that conversation in the same way that you did. And mainly because I feel like this team is a lot like every other great team in America, where they're not perfect. There isn't a super team in America. There's so much parity right now that I never really took Kansas out of that conversation like you did.
I'll give it to you that the peers aren't as dominant, but there are teams getting stronger as things go along. And when I see Kansas get out-rebounded in that way at home to Cincinnati, there are other teams in the country that will push them around. And that's the part that, again, like, just something there. And look, I'm perfectly ready and able to put them right back there where I had them at the beginning of the season. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying I don't think they can get there. I'm not saying I don't think they can win a national championship. I'm not saying any of those things. Just saying I thought they'd be further along than they are on January 23rd to being that team.
So what do you specifically need to see from them when you say you think that they should be further along? What does that mean?
Well, I do. They need one or two guys. I mean, they need to at least have a 7-man rotation, not a 5-man. That would be one thing. But you can't have games at home where you get out rebounded ever when you've got Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, and Kevin McCullough basically playing every minute of every game. That can't happen. That needs to be what they do better than anybody else. There should not be a team in the country that is better defensively or better at rebounding or any of those like toughness defense type things. I think Furphy can settle in and help them with some of their offensive stuff.
And when you talk about how
that's not even the most important though. It's this other stuff.
When you're mentioning that you thought they would be further along, I think you can point at Johnny Furphy as an example of how at least one player is coming along. He had a double-double last night, 23 points, 11 rebounds. He's a freshman, and he only got added to the starting rotation a couple of weeks ago. And so him coming along in that way, like, that's great. And so you're starting to see that expanded role in conference play when he's needed the most. So I do think that there are some areas where they are progressing nicely.
He has been, but that's their 5th starter. Would you say that Elmarco Jackson, Jamari McDowell, or Nicholas Timberlake are where you thought they'd be by January 23rd?
No, and that's why they're not getting minutes in the way that they had been.
But that's a problem. That's a big problem, though. They need to be they can't run a 5-man rotation.
Sure they can. How many times have we seen Bill Self run his starters ragged?
A 5-man?
Okay, maybe a 6-man rotation, but we don't see.
That's a big difference.
Especially in conference play. Bill Self is notorious for not playing bench players, and they have a ton of success every year.
He has 7-man rotations. That's his thing. And they may be able to get there, but
continue to not overreact in the way that you are. And especially if they didn't have Johnny Furphy, then they've got no other option. But at least
I'm not
coming
overreacting. I'm not trying to, again, I think they'll win the Big 12. I'm not trying to overreact. There's still something that, and maybe the reason they're getting out rebounded at home to Cincinnati is because they're running those guys every minute of every game. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's a part of it too. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network tonight when we wrap up Sports Daily after this.
Think you know playoff football? Answer 3 questions correctly in BetMGM's challenge, and you could win a share of $1 million in bonus bets. Simply log into your existing BetMGM account and access the free-to-play $1 Million Playoff Football Challenge. Then submit your entry by answering 3 questions about the Pro Football Playoffs each week. If you get all 3 correct, you could win a share of $1 million in bonus bets. Experience the playoffs like never before with BetMGM's challenge. Then keep the action going with same-game parlays, live betting, and boosted odds specials for the biggest gridiron showdowns all month long. No one does playoff football like the king of sportsbooks. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for term. 21 plus only. Kansas only. Existing customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel.
Pizza John's, open since 1969. Dine in Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. at 208 South Baltimore in Derby. Give them a call at 788-2011 or go online at pizzajohnsderby.com. Pizza John's, purveyors of round meals and flat snacks.
Tired of that constant dripping? Superior Plumbing is here to help. Our parts department stocks only genuine top-quality parts for repairs that last. Brands like Kohler, Delta, and American Standard faucets, water heaters, toilets, and more. Whether you're a trade professional or a DIYer, we have licensed plumbers on hand to help.
Superior Plumbing will come a-running, 'cause we care, treat you fair and square. And our name says it all, Superior.
How much money in taxes will you owe when you retire? If you don't know, that's okay. Let us help you. Market Tax Services has created retirementtax.com just for you. This brand new website is user-friendly and features accessible information and a helpful tool, the Retirement Tax Calculator. Click on the button and find out how much you're set to owe in less time than it took me to read this script. Again, that's retirementtax.com. Your home for taxes in retirement.
It's cold outside, but spring mowing season will be here soon. Now is the time to bring your Husqvarna mower to Maximum Outdoor for the Husqvarna Winter Service Special. Save 15% off winter service labor or 50% off pickup and delivery within a 25-mile radius now through February. Avoid the spring service crunch and save money with the Husqvarna Winter Service Special. South of 21st and Andover Road, or west location, south of Kellogg on West Street. Or visit MaximumOutdoor.com.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now.
800-583-5795.
Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS. There is zero risk to you. If we can't reduce your tax debt, then you pay nothing. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have a 5-star rating on Google and Yelp and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com
or call 800-583-5795. That's 800-583-5795.
Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
The KFH Studios, powered by Devon James Injury Lawyers. Call 888-8888. That's 888-8888.
The Associated Press men's college basketball top 25. Same two teams remain at the top. Reigning national champion Connecticut at number 1 and Purdue number 2. KU drops from number 3 down 4 spots to number 7 following a loss at West Virginia. The Big 12 still leads the nation with 7 ranked teams. The Jayhawks were looking to bounce back from that loss at West Virginia on Saturday, last night in Lawrence when they were hosting Cincinnati. It was the first ever conference matchup between the Jayhawks and the Bearcats. KU jumped out to a big lead early. Cincinnati clawing their way back to a 35-35 tie at halftime, but some really cold shooting in the second half for the Bearcats led to a 74-69 Jayhawk win. Next up for KU, a road matchup at number 23, Iowa State. Tune in right here to 97.5 and 1240 to KFH tonight at 6 o'clock. It's the Chiefs Kingdom Show. Filling in today for Ted the Sports Head, I'm Jed Chambers.
Hello, Wichita. Start your day laughing with the Bob and Tom Show. Find us mornings right here on 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, that's it for us. Appreciate Malcolm Carter popping in for the first hour. Appreciate Trius Latta, our KU insider, Dan Israel from the Chiefs Radio Network, our Chiefs insider popping on the show today. All of those folks out there listening, watching us on our video stream, we appreciate you as well. Don't forget, you've got the New Heights podcast, Jason and Travis Kelce, you can find on the Odyssey app coming here. Jim Rome, 11 to 2, Bob and Jeff locally 2 to 4, Zach Gelb for a couple hours, and then the Chiefs Kingdom Show at 6 o'clock. Tommy, enjoy the day.
Sounds good. See you back here tomorrow.
We'll see you guys on a big Wednesday. Later.